Imagine a fierce storm raging outside, rain pounding the windows of a quiet diner. What if one simple act of kindness, on the worst day of your life, came back to change everything forever? Keep watching, because in just a few minutes you'll see how giving away a single breakfast turned a struggling single dad into a man whose future was completely rewritten. The storm had rolled in without warning. Thick sheets of rain pelted the diner windows, as if the sky itself were grieving. Inside, where the morning crowds usually hummed with chatter, only one man sat alone, with a plate he could barely afford. Rowan Hale, a single father with tired eyes and calloused hands, had finally saved enough to buy a real breakfast, after weeks of living off instant noodles. But before he could take the first bite, he saw her. She stumbled through the diner doors like a ghost blown in by the storm. Soaking wet, trembling, hair plastered to her cheeks. A woman whose despair filled the room, before she spoke a single word. Her clothes were torn, her lips pale, and when the waitress asked what she needed, she whispered so faintly it was almost swallowed by the rain. "Help, please." Rowan didn't know why he stood up. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe desperation mirrored his own struggles. Or maybe it was the memory of his little daughter Mira, who once said, "Daddy, helping someone is like giving them your sunshine." Whatever the reason, Rowan walked toward the stranger, with his plate still warm in his hands. He set it gently in front of her. "Here," he said softly, the worry tugging at him. "You need this more than I do." The woman's fingers shook as she reached out. She didn't just look hungry, she looked heartbroken. She devoured the sandwich as tears escaped the corners of her eyes, mixing with raindrops that still clung to her skin. That tightness in Rowan's chest grew heavier. He sat across from her, not touching anything, simply watching to make sure she didn't collapse. Her name, she eventually murmured, was Era. She didn't offer more. Not where she came from, not what had happened, not why she looked like someone running for her life. But Rowan didn't push. He knew what silence looked like after trauma. He had lived in it once, after Mira's mother passed away and left him drowning in bills and responsibilities he wasn't prepared for. Era finished eating but didn't leave. She sat staring at her empty wrapper, as if afraid that moving would erase what little safety she'd found. The storm outside calmed, but her breathing remained shallow, uneven. Rowan called Mira's school to say he'd be late picking her up. Then he offered Era his jacket, though it left him shivering. When she tried to refuse, he simply wrapped it around her shoulders anyway. Her eyes widened in surprise, as though kindness was something she hadn't seen in years. Over the next hour, the two sat there in the quiet hum of the diner. Era slowly thawed, her posture easing, her expression softening, though fear still flickered behind her eyes. She told Rowan she had no money, no phone, no belongings, except the small camera she clutched like a lifeline. He offered to drive her somewhere safe, but she grew tense and shook her head violently. She didn't explain, and Rowan didn't pry. Instead, he gave her his leftover change, so she could get another meal later, even though that meant he'd need to skip dinner himself. She whispered, "Thank you," in a voice that cracked like glass. When she stood to leave, Rowan felt an inexplicable dread, like he was watching someone disappear into a darkness he couldn't pull them from. She hesitated at the door, looking back just once, her eyes shimmering with an emotion he couldn't name. Then she vanished into the easing daylight. Rowan never saw her again. Not that day, not that week, not even that month. But the consequences of that morning began unfolding, sooner than he realized. 3 weeks later, Rowan received a letter, sleek, formal, with embossed lettering he'd only ever seen in movies. His stomach knotted as he stared at it. Lawyers didn't send letters to struggling single dads without a reason, and rarely a good one. He feared debt collectors, lawsuits, something he'd done wrong without knowing. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a short message. "Mr. Hale, we request your presence at the Vin and Alder firm for a matter of urgent and personal importance regarding Miss Era Vin." Era, the woman from the diner, the one who had disappeared. He read the letter again and again. Then he sat on his couch, with his head in his hands, trying to make sense of it. Why would lawyers be involved? Why him? Had something happened to her? Had she been in danger? Was he the last person to see her safe? His breath quickened with a rising sense of guilt and panic. But fear couldn't stop him. He had to know. The next morning, after dropping Mira off at school, he took the bus across the city to a towering glass building that seemed to swallow daylight whole. Inside, he felt painfully out of place: business suits, marble floors, polished chrome, and there he stood, worn jeans, fraying jacket sleeves, hands rough from years of struggling to keep afloat. An assistant led him to a quiet conference room overlooking the city. Rowan clenched his fists to stop his hands from shaking. Then 2 attorneys entered, placing a thick folder in front of him. "Mr. Hale," the older one began. "We represent Ms. Era Vin." Rowan stiffened. "Is she okay?" "She is safe," the attorney replied gently. "Thanks in large part to you." Relief crashed into him so suddenly he had to steady himself against the table, but confusion quickly followed. "I don't understand. Why am I here?" The lawyers exchanged a look. Then the younger one slid a photograph from the folder toward him. It showed Era smiling radiantly, dressed in expensive clothing, standing in front of what looked like a high-profile art gallery. Rowan blinked. It looked nothing like the broken woman he'd met. "Ms. Vin," the attorney explained, "is a renowned photographer and the sole heir to a substantial family trust. But she has also been battling severe trauma, following a violent confrontation with someone who attempted to exploit her work and her personal life. After escaping that situation, she disappeared without telling anyone. She refused protection, refused financial help. She simply ran?" Rowan felt the room tilt slightly. "But she looked homeless, terrified." "She was," the lawyer said quietly. "Trauma can strip a life bare, no matter how privileged it once was." The younger attorney leaned forward. "Mr. Hale, Miss Vin told us that when she truly had nothing, not even hope, you gave her food. You offered warmth. You treated her like a human being, rather than a burden or a spectacle." Rowan swallowed hard. "Anyone would have done the same." "Most people didn't," she replied. "You were the only one who did." He didn't know how to respond. The older attorney opened the folder further and slid several papers toward Rowan. "Miss Vin instructed us to deliver this to you. She has gone to an undisclosed recovery center, where she will remain until she can heal fully. She will not be reachable for some time. But before leaving, she wanted to ensure that the kindness you showed her is not forgotten." Rowan's brow furrowed. "What is all this?" The attorney offered a small smile. "It is a full financial grant, established in your name and your daughter's, enough to cover stable housing, childcare, and 3 years of living expenses, while you pursue any career or education you wish." Ms. Vin said, and I quote, "He gave me a meal when I only felt like a ghost. So I want to give him back his future." Rowan's breath hitched. He shook his head. This can't be real. I didn't do anything to deserve." "You gave hope to someone who had lost everything," the lawyer said softly. "Sometimes that's worth more than you realize." Rowan's eyes burned, and he looked away, overwhelmed. The thought that a single breakfast, something he could barely afford, had become the turning point in someone's life, felt surreal. But the greater shock was what she had given back, not just money, freedom, stability, a chance to give Mira the life she deserved. He left the law firm with trembling hands, clutching the folder like it contained sunlight. Outside, daylight glimmered across the city, warm and steady. And for the first time in years, Rowan didn't feel the weight of survival crushing his back. Instead, he felt gratitude, responsibility, and a deep, fierce determination not to waste the second chance Era had given him. In the months that followed, Rowan's life transformed, in quiet, profound ways. He and Mira moved into a small but safe apartment, where the roof didn't leak and the walls didn't groan when the wind blew. He enrolled in a training program for technical drafting, a field he had once dreamed of but never had the means to pursue. Mira blossomed, with new friends, new books, new laughter. And from time to time, Rowan visited the diner, sitting by the window where Era once shivered in the storm. He hoped, someday, she might return, stronger, healed, smiling again. He never knew if she'd come back. But he did know this. The world is full of moments where kindness can bridge the distance between despair and hope, even when no one is watching.